What up, folks? Once again, it's your boy Chicago, the handsome liberal. Coming to you with another video. As you can see, this one is titled Black Republicans and Why Blacks Don't Like Them. Before we get into the video, I'm asking you to go ahead and smash that subscribe button so you know when I'm dropping these gems on you. If you like what I got to say at the end of the video, feel free to hit the dislike button. If you think I'm full of shit, hit the dislike button. So, hope to hear from you. Got anything to say, hash it out in the comments. I always respond to the comments. Black Republicans, why do we have an issue with them? Well, if you ask conservatives, it's because we don't like them because they don't drink the Kool-Aid. They're free thinkers. They do their research. They don't buy into what the liberal media tells them, and they know how to go out there and get the knowledge for themselves and make a sound, logical decision. And that's why Democrats don't like Black Republicans. Well, that's to me, it sounds asinine. Let's just be real. If you are a conservative, what do you believe in? The sanctity of life. You're generally not a big fan of abortion. You're pro-Christianity, pro-military, pro-police. You like America in the traditional ways that our founding fathers intended. That's where you're pro-Constitution. You're not in favor of big government. You tend to like little government, self-reliance, things like that. We don't hate Black Republicans because they are in favor of that stuff. The reason we have an issue with Black Republicans is generally because they often make a name for themselves by attacking Black people, particularly when it comes to commentators or radio personalities that happen to be Black. That's their claim to fame, is that they came up saying all of the negative aspects of the Black community, airing out dirty laundry, so to speak, and they captivated a white audience that wants to say the same things, and that's where their claim to fame is. And that would obviously be Candace Owens, I'm talking to you, former gubernatorial candidate for California, Larry Elders, I'm talking to you, Hodge twins, Diamond and Silk, all of these folks that are Black on the right-wing side of things that make a name for themselves by generally criticizing Black people. You're never going to get a fan base of Black people by making a name for yourself by criticizing Blacks. Candace Owens obviously would probably be one of the most well-known. Now, she hasn't ran for any office. I mean, it's been hashed around. There's been plenty of conservatives suggesting that she runs for various offices, but in the Black community, Candace Owens is widely unfavored. And it's mainly because, like I just said, for the most part, if you watch or follow her on YouTube, or, she has her own little podcast, it's just a host of negative aspects of, and negative comments about the Black community. Whether she's criticizing Chicago or Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago, or she's criticizing Black schools, public schools, or it's just all negative stuff. Like, for instance, she made a video in regards to the George Floyd killing. Now, she did say Derek Chauvin, former officer Derek Chauvin, was wrong, but about 90% of her video was criticizing George Floyd and his entire criminal history. And then she jumped over to, well, Black people idolize rap stars and they idolize all the negative aspects of society. You want to say she's right? Not going to argue with you whether she's right or wrong. I'm just simply saying nobody is going to like somebody who's just saying you guys are all, pieces of shit, so to speak. Same thing with Larry Elder. Larry Elder has made a lot of negative comments like that. One being that he mentioned in regards to reparations, which nobody thinks is going to happen, but he's quoted as saying, if we're going to talk about reparations, we should talk about slave owners because they were mistreated because they had their property taken from them. You're not going to find a lot of African Americans that support a Black guy that's suggesting that slave owners receive reparations. It's insane that it would even come out. But when you ask why do Blacks dislike Black Republicans, it's stuff like that. It's stuff like Black Lives Matter, which is widely favored by African Americans. Well, if you're African American and you suggest that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group, but you believe that the Confederacy is all about pride and heritage and love, you're probably not going to do well in the black community. And that's the mantra for a lot of black Republicans. They support those who want to wave the Confederate flag, and they have a negative aspect of those who want to wave any flag in regards to BLM or Colin Kaepernick or any of these movements that you're hearing about today. They obviously do not like the woke culture and cancel culture or any of that stuff. So these are things that in the black community, they don't just favor them. They believe a lot of this stuff is necessary for progress and civil rights. And here you got a black person saying that all of this stuff is terroristic, it's wrong for America, it's unnecessary. You know, yeah, you're not going to get a lot of respect from the black community going against things that are widely favored in the black community. So it has nothing to do with being a free thinker or thinking for yourself or any of that, or, you know, not following the liberal media, which also, a statement like that is also very critical of black people. It's basically saying that the vast majority of black people are not smart enough to think for themselves, or they're all being duped by the media. I mean, you're basically just calling an entire race of people stupid. So if you're saying that this black Republican is very intelligent and he's smarter than this dumb race that can't be, you know, that's not smart enough to do their own research or make logical decisions. None of that is going to do well among African Americans. Now, let's look at it from the other side. There are people in the white community that have made a name for themselves in modern times criticizing white folks. Joy Behar, you know, comedian Joy Behar, she's on The View all the time pointing out flaws of white people. Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo on CNN, they do it. White people don't like them. You don't want somebody that makes a name for themselves telling people negative things about you all the time. Isn't that why a lot of whites are not in favor of critical race theory? They're saying it paints them as oppressors and paints them in a negative light. Isn't that the whole reason why we don't even want to talk about it? A lot of the things that happen in history is because it'll make white people look bad. Well, if you don't like it, why would you expect a black Republican to be in favor of a candidate that's doing nothing but pointing out negative stuff in the black community? Now, we could talk all day about high crime rates in Chicago and Baltimore and Philadelphia. I've lived in Chicago for 30 years. I'm well aware that there is a lot of gang violence and murders in Chicago. And since I moved away from Chicago, it's increased. I'm well aware of that. However, black people or African Americans are not living in the lap of luxury down in Mississippi and Alabama, where there are plenty of them. You don't hear black Republicans talking about that poverty at all, because it's not ran by liberals. Those states are ran by Republicans, so you don't point them out. But there's plenty of horribly impoverished people living in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, all of that. And you don't hear them saying much about it at all. Or what ends up happening is you find the lowest common denominator to blame. You know, the governor's Republican, maybe the mayor's Republican. But if we really look hard, there's a city councilman that happens to be Democrat. Blame it on him. Or there's a representative. I mean, you know, whereas if you look at Chicago, they're blaming the mayor, they're blaming the governor of the state, et cetera, et cetera. And when the minute Biden became president, now it's his fault too. When Trump was president, what was going on in Chicago was not his fault. Now all of a sudden you get Obama or you get Biden in office, and it's all the way up to the president what's happening in Chicago. So that's just politics, though. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, if you're pro-life, pro-military, or you pro-police or something, that's politics. But another one I would bring up also is that the relationship between blacks and law enforcement has been horrible since there has been law enforcement in America. A lot of people say, or a lot of rumors are, that one of the main reasons law enforcement was created was to keep black slaves on their plantation. So you'd capture slaves that escaped and take them back. That was part of the root of the police department. I'm not going to argue whether that is or isn't, but we do know that throughout the Jim Crow era, keeping blacks in their neighborhoods. You know, you drive into the wrong neighborhood, they call them sundown towns. You know, if you're in this town after sundown and you're black, you're going to have problems. Sundown towns. The police were used to enforce a lot of that Jim Crow shit. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that the history between blacks and police is horrible. You know, you can't eat in this restaurant because you're black, or you can't be in this neighborhood because you're black, or you can't use this public pool because you're black. And the person that's going to ensure that you don't do that is going to be a cop. They're going to call the cops. So the cops are coming. The cops are going to be the person I call when I want to oppress or take away your rights. Okay, so fast forward to 2021. Well, why haven't you guys gotten over that? Well, in some cases, it's because it was being done to our moms or grandparents, and they sat down and told us those stories over the years. And I mean, no different than if your mom or your grandma sat down and told you a whole bunch of horrible things that happened to her. You're not just going to discount that because it happened to her and it's not happening to you. That's your mom or that's your grandma. And it's hard to get a lot of people in modern times to understand that. But the only way we're going to heal in regards to what happened in the past is more time has got to go by. You got to first of all, you got to let more of the people that went through it actually pass away. So not to get too far off the subject, when you look at someone like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton that we right-wingers hate and just cannot understand why they have not gotten over the past, you got to assume that both Jackson and Sharpton have received over 1 million death threats. They've seen the worst there is from Caucasians. What do you expect them to do? Reach the age of 70 and just get over it? No, they have to die off. They're not going to get over it. No different than we wouldn't expect a U.S. soldier that's been in Iraq being shot at for 10 years straight to just get over it one day. It's not going to happen. Let's just be real. You'd have permanent PTSD. We understand that a soldier can be in combat for a handful of years and have PTSD that may last the rest of his life. But you expect Sharpton or Jackson receiving death threats for decades on end and just come around and be cool with it? I mean, it's not going to happen. But that is the reason I wanted to drop this video. The reason why we have an issue with black Republicans is because of the way they address black people. Now, there are some black Republicans that don't do as bad. Tim Scott out in Carolina. Tim Scott's one. He hasn't made a name for himself attacking black people. Ben Carson of the Trump administration. We said some shit about him, but blacks for the most part, don't have a deep-seated hatred for Ben Carson. He didn't make a name of himself attacking black people. He ran for president. He was a slow, smooth-talking guy. He stuck to right-wing principles. We don't like right-wing principles. We don't hate them. There are plenty of blacks that are pro-military, pro-choice. There's black police. All of the things that Republicans, conservatives stand for, there are blacks that stand for the same stuff. So just keep the social issues of attacking black people out of it, and as a black Republican, your chances may go up. So I would say Ben Carson is another one. Ben Carson didn't do that. I mean, he was a soft-spoken guy, and once Trump won the office of presidency, he absorbed him into his administration, and for the most part, Ben Carson took a seat and sat down in an easy job. I think he was in charge of housing and urban development. I don't know how a brain surgeon gets that job when we obviously needed a better surgeon general, because that guy was saying that COVID was no worse than the flu. Ben Carson should have had that job. He has a medical background, but that's a whole different video. But I will just say that if you are a black Republican, just stick to your principles. Can't argue with a man that sticks to his principles. Can't argue with somebody who is, pro-life or, like I said, pro-military, pro-police, in favor of small government. I mean, we're going to go back and forth because it is politics, but you're not making a name for yourself by criticizing the community you grew up in. Ben Carson grew up on the mean streets of Detroit. He's a something from nothing story. He doesn't have a huge, lengthy history of criticizing black people. He's spoken publicly numerous times. He said a few things, but it hasn't been that bad. It really hasn't been that bad. And my guess is, if he showed up and ran for office as a black Republican, he might get a significant amount of African Americans to listen to him if he can separate himself from the Trump administration, because the Trump administration did exactly that. I mean, President Trump criticized Chicago and Black Lives Matter and Colin Kaepernick and things like that every time they could get a chance to do it. Fortunately, anybody put a microphone in Ben Carson's face, he shut the fuck up. He didn't get involved in that. And as a result, he doesn't have a lengthy YouTube history of saying all kinds of horrible stuff like that, like Larry Elder in California did. I mean, and they did exactly that. When Larry Elder ran for governor of California, they tied him to the Trump administration, and he was through. He was absolutely through. And that probably is going to be an issue with a lot of former Trump officials when they run for office. Certainly if they do it in areas where there's a significant amount of liberals, is they're going to tie them to Trump, and that's going to be a problem for them. So we'll see how that goes, but that is why we have an issue with black Republicans, is because as black people, we believe they have an issue with us. They just like to air out our dirty laundry. And like I said earlier in the video, when there's a white person that makes a name for themselves by criticizing white people, whites don't like them either. So that's what I have to say on that. I'd love to hear what you guys think. You think I'm way off on this one? If you're kind of feeling that, do me a favor, hit that like button. I need that. I need that up out of you. If you got an issue with it, hit the dislike button. But drop a comment and tell me why you dislike it, and we can hash that out in the comments. Once again, it's your boy Chicago with another video. The Handsome Liberal. Talk to you guys later.